Hi, thank you for watching. So as the title says, Atlantis found in the Sahara Desert. Pretty interesting, right? If you haven't checked out my first video, I encourage you to check out the first one. It'll explain a little bit of where this location is and just the overview of what I hope to achieve with this video series. So the spot we're looking at right now, as I explained in the first video, is Arunga Crater. Pretty interesting looking spot. Today in this clip, I just want to go over a bit of the geology and topography of the site. So here is another shot of the crater in question. It is a crater that has been proven. You can see the inner uplift and the inner crater edge, as well as a secondary outer crater edge that create the two somewhat circular islands. It's theorized that potentially it was multiple impacts from multiple meteorites to create this formation. It's very, very unique. As I said earlier, I haven't seen anything like it. I've looked at a lot of craters, but we'll take a better look at the topography in the next few slides, and you can decide. So here are a few radar images that clearly show the structure of the crater. Pretty well takes away the sand. You can make out the inner and outer ring very easily. You can see in the first shot there's some hammocking in the hills that is quite an interesting pattern of erosion. So Plato said in the center was a very low hill surrounded by a very fair plain. Just an incredible natural structure. Was it modified by man? The stone which was used in the work they quarried from underneath the center island, and from underneath the zones on the outer wall as well as the inner wall. So if this was a more uniform crater, potentially, maybe they carved out the center ring as they quarried more stone to produce their structures, their temples, as Plato claims, and their houses. Then we look on the outside ring, or the second ring of water. You can see spots that could have been quarried. They're very well defined in the rings. What's interesting about this shot is the closer you get to the actual water, where it would have been deepest, you have an area that looks like it could have been cut out. It kind of stops abruptly and goes from deep to shallow on the outer section, and the closer you get to the access point, the point of where the port could have been, um, it just looks like it's been carved out, possibly carved out as the waters of Lake Chad slowly maybe rose and fell, or just started to subside over time, or else maybe to allow larger ships with a deeper draft carrying more cargo to come in. Very interesting photo. Here's a picture I found on Google just to give you an idea of the size. So it's the whole structure, the whole crater from ridge to ridge is 16 kilometers by 16 kilometers. Each of the circular islands is 3 kilometers in width, the center island being approximately 2 kilometers. The center, the picture that's set beside it is, I believe, the city of London, a very large, heavily populated uh, civilian center. So if you had an island like this in the time period we're talking about in the first video, I talked about briefly the Green Sahara. If you could manage to get to this island, if you could swim to this island, which would probably be pretty dangerous, but if you could take a boat to this island It would be a huge advantage, I believe, in the evolution of man. If you were able to get here, you could potentially make those islands predator-free very quickly. The embankments are quite steep. The raw materials are there, especially if the plain, as Plato claims in the center, was very fertile. I think this would be a great place to hang out in the Sahara with all the predators and all the livestock that's available to hunt and all the natural foliage that you can just chow down on. Just hang out here and evolve and build stuff and just increase the population. And this slide shows the lofty banks I spoke of in the last one. In the first picture to on the top right, you can see this man here is sitting on the center of the outer ring of the inside the crater, looking out to the inside ring of the outside crater. It appears to be quite a distance here. You can see that the terrain is quite rugged. Plato said that docks were cut alongside and that the banks were raised considerably above the water. In the graph on this slide as well, the blue line shows where the water levels would have to be to make all three rings level if there was to be water travel between the three rings. So if the water level was at that level, the first ring, the depth would be approximately 50 meters. The second ring, the depth of the water would be 100 meters. And the third ring, at its lowest point, the depth would be 150 meters. So it's quite a large body of water, I guess. It's pretty formidable if you wanted to cross it, but I believe it could be done, and if it could be done, the advantages would be huge. If you could make some nice reed rafts and get across there, I doubt like lions, tigers, and bears would give you any problems. So here's a great photo. It's not aligned to north, so it's kind of lopsided. If you're familiar with the shots, or if you go on Google Earth and check it out, you'll find out the actual orientation of this picture, but you can see the striations on the land and how aggressive the erosion has been from wind. You can almost, I would like to think, see the bank followed by the darkening of where Lake Megachad may have come in contact with the Arunga crater. One of the interesting things that Plato talks about Atlantis having access to is a cool spring as well as a warm spring of water. They used the water for their baths, and it was a great amenity to have. Now, cool water, everyone's got cool water. There's lots of references in history to sacred cool springs. No big deal. But a warm spring, that is a little more rare. I can't think of any people having access to warm springs except for people who are around volcanic activity. Now, Amikusi, on the other hand, is currently an active volcano as far as NASA is concerned. On the southern flank, there is still active thermal activity. Very interesting. Now, if this whole area was flooded at some point, the state of Amikusi hasn't changed in the last 10,000 years. They don't know what it did before the last 10,000 years, but they're sure it hasn't done anything different in the last 10,000 years. If this area was flooded and you had active magma and active thermal springs potentially, I think that would definitely supply a city that was capable of transporting or having aqueduct system to bring warm water into such baths. Maybe even having natural warm springs on site. The whole country was said by him to be very lofty and precipitous on the side of the sea, but the country immediately about the surrounding the city was a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains. So in this picture here put together, you can see that the crater structure itself is quite raised above the surrounding landscape by quite a lot, as we looked at the earlier pictures and graphs. The surrounding area itself being very flat. If you're familiar with the area, we're talking northern Chad and the Green Sahara. I think if you would be able to master the landscape, the potential for food supply, for grazing lands as well as agriculture would be endless as long as conditions were good. The surrounding mountains itself, the mountain in the background is Emekusi. You have the Tassili area around it. Now, Emekusi is a very interesting mountain. It's very interesting to have a large mountain and the place that could be Atlantis in the shadow of it. I'm sure most people are familiar with Atlas, the son of Poseidon, who is said to have created this city, or created the fabled Atlantis, to have what could be Mount Atlas sitting in the background of this shot, I think is pretty big deal. In the next video, I'm going to go over why I believe that this is Mount Atlas and the significance of that. So thank you very much for watching. As I said earlier, if you haven't checked out the first video, please do like and subscribe. I will be putting out more videos shortly. Thank you very much. Take care.